he had a lot of different quirks that he had that were just part of him. I just figured, he's going to have this his entire life. In Denmark, when you do get a diagnosis, they have a nutritional package that they give you, because we know the gut-brain connection is important. We know that food is important and nutrition is important. And so they gave a whole bunch of things that here is what you should be eating. And and they actually had name of the name brand, different things to give him. And I did. And I remember one year thinking, staring at him and thinking, is it working? How do you know? I can't see a change in him. I don't know if it's really working. And then I heard about Zinzino, and Zinzino is a test-based, and I thought, okay, well then at least I could test him, and plus I had 4 children, so I could do my own little study. Now my youngest was the one with the Asperger diagnosis. His name is Christian, and the older 3 children didn't have any diagnosis, and he was just very different from the other 3. So just to tell you a little bit about him, he was our little professor for the one thing, but he only talked about the certain topics that he was really interested in. He had a lot of GI issues. They were giving him, over here, the brand is called Movicol, because he was quite constipated and it was a big issue. He had dark circles under his eyes. He lived really in his own world. He had a couple of computer buddies that he spent time with. And at the age of 13, he was just, had his one really good friend. He liked to be over there, but he had little things, like he was struggling with the things he ate. I would make his plate and say, you have to at least eat what's on your plate. And I was very careful, and I knew what he liked, but he liked the same exact foods. And he didn't like to eat at other places. He probably wouldn't eat out if we didn't bring him home to eat. It was really a hard thing to do. So I started him, and about 2 weeks after what Zinzino had suggested to do, we were at our dinner table, and Christian is asking his siblings about their day. I knew that was kind of weird, and I was thinking, well, maybe I'm just looking for it, right? Maybe I'm hoping that something's changing. And as he was talking more to his siblings in a connecting way, almost interested, like, is this for real? But that same day, he took second helpings. He never did things like that. He wouldn't do it himself anyway. But he did so many strange things that day. I was thinking, could it be that this is really changing him, this Zinzino stuff? Could it really be? And then about a week later, so he'd been taking Zinzino for 3 weeks, I came to pick him up at his best friend's house. Now, he'd been best friends with this guy since kindergarten, since school, for 7 years. Christian was 13 at the time. And I always came right around dinner time, and as his best friend's name was Asmus, a very Danish name, I know it's kind of weird, you're like, what's his name? But his name was Asmus, and I came to pick him up at dinner time. Like I said, because he didn't eat at other places. So I came to the front door, and usually I would just come and knock and say hi in the door, and Christian would come up from the computer and come down and take off with me. Well, that day I got to Asmus's house, and I came up to the front door, and the front door flies open, And Asmus's parents are in the doorway. What'd you do to Christian? What do you mean? And they said, for the first time ever, we just said, come and eat like we usually do to the kids. Because Asmus has a big sister and a little sister. And we heard all the voices, and we heard that extra one say, coming. And they looked at each other and they said, was that Christian? And it was. Christian came down and for the first time sat at their dinner table, ate dinner with them, and was asking them about their day and actually being more social. It was kind of crazy. That's when I started looking into and saying, okay, what's this stuff anyway? What does it do and why? I wanted to know. I mean, as a parent, anything that's doing something for my son, I'd want to know. I think most parents do. So I started going to little events where the scientists behind Zinzino were speaking. One of them is Dr. Paul Clayton, and he started just explaining about the gut-brain connection and what you can do with that and what omegas really do. And I ended up waiting in line for like a couple hours to speak with him personally. And I brought him some of the results of Zinzino, and he said, well, this makes sense. You're giving him a high doses of fatty acids, and this, because of the formulation, you can absorb it. So it's like if you had a brick wall and you were going to rebuild it, you would use bricks. You would use the building blocks. Here, fatty acids is the omegas. They're essential fatty acids. And your body is made up of 100 trillion cells, and the cell membrane is fatty acids. So these omegas are the fatty acids. And you've heard of omega-3. A lot of people don't always hear of omega-6, omega-9. There's a lot of different omegas. But mainly, your cell membrane is made up of omega-6s and omega-3s. And you're supposed to have the exact same amount of each. So, a 1-to-1 ratio. This is a little machine. And it's kind of like, I think of it like your car. Your car, to go, it needs gas, it needs oil, and it needs to get rid of the exhaust. So, the first thing that needs to be done is to get enough omegas in your body, because if you have more than 3 times the amount of omega-6 in your body, that cell membrane gets stiff. So all the nutrients that we're getting from our food can't get in to the little machine. Well, it's like if you don't get gas in the car's not gonna go. So getting that flexible. Actually, omegas are so important. Not only is your body at least, I mean, minimum should be 8% omega-3 in your body. But it doesn't, like one of our other scientists says he wants to be over 10, like 10-12% omega-3. And then be like saying, okay, we're gonna make a chocolate cake today, but we're gonna leave out the sugar. Something else that's 10%, whatever it is never gonna be the same. Our bodies aren't the same either. And why is omegas so super important? Well, not only is your body 10%, but most of the omegas, first of all, that's the cell membranes. The other portion of it, over 60% of your brain is omega-3 fat. It's fat. And we've heard that. I remember in school when we heard about our brains are so much fat and all the jokes we made in school. Oh, you're a fathead, you know, all kinds of funny things. But when your brain is actually omega-3 fats, we need to get that much omega into our body. And some people just take more supplements. Years ago, we used to get a lot of omega-3 from a lot of different areas. You could get it from fish. You could get it from your meat. But nowadays, well, we don't eat as much fish. And the fish we eat is usually farmed. We're not really fish sticks and things like that. So we're not getting the same fish. Or, and you know, if the fish is farmed, you know, they're not eating the algae, they're eating grain, which is omega-6. So actually all the places, or cows, or you know, pork, or a lot of our meat, chicken, they're being fed grain, they're not out eating grass. So we're getting less and less and less and less omega-3s, and we're getting higher concentrates of omega-6s. So our omega-6-3 balance is way, way off. But we also know that omega-3s in general don't work. We can see it on the testing. Because when they refine oil and they get the fish oil out of the fish, fish has polyphenols with it so that we can absorb it. And that doesn't have it in regular fish oil. So there's a big difference between fish oil and oily fish. Oily fish works. We know we're supposed to take it, but oily fish are things like sardines and anchovies and mackerel, and we're not going to get anybody to eat those kind of things. And actually, if you ate a whole bunch of fish that were very high, or the wild caught fish, and you ate a lot of it, well, then we probably have an issue with mercury and everything else. So how do we get around it? That's what Zinzino spent 30 years trying to figure out. One of the professors, old Ida, spent a lot of time figuring out, and that's what they did. So they've got the fish oil and the polyphenols, and it works like fish. It's the cell flexible. And that's what changed my son. The cell got flexible. So, and when you get it flexible, it means now you can get those nutrients in the cell. But it probably is more important the next step, because every machine is going, you know, if you plug up the exhaust of your car, it doesn't go. And when you have an omega-6 rebalance that's out of balance and it's really stiff, your machines are trying to go, but they can't get the exhaust out. So they're not really working. And that's one of the reasons why brains can't communicate, because the cell membrane is so stiff. You know, when my son started to change, and I was testing him, because you can test this omega-6 rebalance. You're not supposed to be over 3-to-1. Actually, in the US, it says 5-to-1, but we know US recommendations are always kind of a little bit out of balance there of what really should be. Most of the scientists say don't go over 3 times the amount of omega-6 in your body as omega-3, just period. Actually, in Japan, they say 2-to-1. So it depends on where you're looking. My son, when I took his test, he started at 29.4-to-1.
Oh.
My other kids were in their teens to 1, which is still way too high, but he was a lot higher than the others. And now your cells regenerate, and your whole body renews all of its cells. It takes 120 days to renew every cell, because your skin cell, your brain cells go a little bit faster, but your red and white blood cells take a little bit more time. So when you get a fully, completely, all your cells renewed, that's 120 days later. Now remember, I was seeing changes in my son. He was changing. He was changing within 3 weeks. So he started at 29.4, and he was taking Zinzino. And I wanted to I wasn't gonna wait 120 days. I wanted to prove that it was this that was changing. And it wasn't just what I was thinking was changing or what I was hoping was changing. I wanted to prove it. And it's not just a quick test. It's actually just a little prick in the finger test. You don't feel it. It's a little bit of blood we send off, and we send it to an independent lab. And that tells us where that omega-6 rebalance is. He started at 29.4. Like I said, red blood cells, we usually test after 120 days, which is 4 months later. I retested him at 30 days. And he was already down to 8 to 1. So he went from 29.4 to 1 down to 8 to 1. And he's a different kid. I mean, he's still a computer nerd. He's still not a real super social person, but he has eye contact. He is interested. He's actually very empathetic. He hugs and touches like he didn't used to do. Things have just changed. And he's 23 years old. It's been 11 years.
Thank you, Carla.
And it's made a total difference. It's made a total difference. And I would say, I don't want this to seem like a sales pitch, because I feel for you guys, all of you. I really feel for you. But read up on what omegas really do. Read up on ADHD and omega-3. Read up on autism and omega-3. Read up on some of those studies and remind yourself that omega-3 has done a lot of great things, but what omega-3 are they really using? Because I can tell you story after story of stories like my son. Lots of them. My cousin was one of them. She saw the change in my son and she said, I need to check out my own daughter. She didn't have her daughter in to get a diagnosis, but her daughter and my son got along really well, and they had a lot of the same traits. And she was actually 89 to 1. Yeah, and my son, after all this time, I didn't know if he would ever be able to move out of our home. And here he is today. He'll be 25 next year. He lives on his own as well.
Thank you so much, Carla. I just wanted to take the time again to kind of absorb this with our group. As you all know, I really don't go out to try to find people to offer a product or a service unless I really feel that there is a smart trajectory to vet that, to see if it works for our families and our children. So that being said, when Carla is explaining the cell membranes and how you need a balance of omega-3s and omega-6s, so that the cells, every single cell in your body, how much did you say, Carla? 100 trillion cells around there? Every single cell should be able to absorb and soak in all of the other beneficial nutrients that you will then reintroduce into the microbiome outside of the omegas. But without facilitating that core ability for absorption, you're losing that potential, and it's just going to come out as what a lot of nutritionists call expensive pee, right?
I think that's very true, because you don't know what's good or what's not. And that's why, for me, this made a big difference, because I had been buying stuff a long time, and finding out that his first score was 29.4 to 1 just meant that it was expensive pee for many years.
Yeah.
But I would say too, there's one other thing that I'm not in doubt about, and that is that microbiome.
Yeah.
And I think those two things, getting your cell in balance and then the microbiome so that you can get those toxins out, has been the key for my son. Now, those two things are what I think everybody who has ADHD and autism has been my goal to let people know about. But it's kind of a hard thing, because I always say, I remember reading Hans Asperger said himself that every child that he studied had a gut issue. Every one of them. And I mean, they're the ones who named it after him, and I really believe that. And the issue also is where we're getting farther and farther out of balance for every generation. So we've done many generational tests now, and they're almost doubling every generation. So wherever we start as a mom, that's where our child starts. And that's been an issue, is we all need that, and we all need to to see how important it really is.
And
And
you're
yeah,
then
I
introducing more environmental toxins on top of being out of balance to begin with. And so, it's a,
it's just compounding
mhm,
everything. And
yeah.
I have the same thing, Jessica. I appreciate you letting me just tell my story here too.
Mhm.
And I don't want it to sound at all as here to, you know, uh, to be a sales pitch. I want you to hear my story on it and
Exactly.
how much I feel for everybody. And I really know as a parent, you do anything you can for your kid. And if people want to know more about what it is, definitely ask, and I will.
Yeah.
And Eric too. Find more.
So real talk too. All you ladies know I do real talk. I've had moms come up to me and they're like, "Why don't you change their diet? Why don't you, try this supplement or make your own probiotic?" Which I've done before and stuff too. And so I understand, and I know you understand, Carla. But we all have a level of understanding that we are at different places of our journey at different times. And so I want to open the playing field for every single caregiver out there and say, I hear you. I know that where you're at right now might be a little bit better than yesterday, might be a little bit worse than yesterday. Why don't I change my daughter's diet? Because I only slept 3 hours last night and I'm hanging on for dear life in fight or flight.
Yeah.
So I'm not at a place mentally, emotionally, spiritually to be ready. And as much as some people might say, hey, that's a little selfish of you because you should sacrifice everything for your child, at the same time, I acknowledge that you are human, and that's why it's important to just come together to be like, okay, what's the next step that you can do to start to explore what will help you to feel better, your child to feel better, your family to feel better, so that you can begin to absorb the joy out of their life. So, um,
Well, it
that being
is
said, the next
when you're.
step is your testing, though, right?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
But I think too, when when there's a big problem happening up in the flight, they always tell you use your own mask
Yes.
first before you help your children, and it's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you guys have been through so much that Trixie says when she has a kid with just ADHD, it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
Then you know how much you've been through when that's easy.
Yeah.
Oh, you're muted, Trixie.
Yeah.
So I find what you're saying extremely interesting. Pretty much my son grew up on whatever vitamin I could sneak into something, and it's the only reason he's healthy right now. He not only has extreme sensory, but he was born with pica. So making sure he ate something that was actually edible was a win for the day. like yes, it's not paper, it's not a nail, it's not glass, it's not a cinder block. Like we're in the clear. So
Yes.
my biggest concern with that though also is I tried in the past because I remember a doctor, a nutritionist at Kapiolani said, okay, you've got to get him on this diet and do all of these things and this will help him. And one of the things she did bring up was omegas. But the taste, no matter what I did, anything that had any type of an oily substance set him off sensory wise. And then when it set him off sensory wise, now he didn't trust putting any food back in his mouth. Now it was like, we have to build that trust up to be able to get that food in his mouth again, get him to start trying to eat. So then I was like, okay, I can either try and get him to eat the stuff that's healthy for him, or I can just make sure that he's eating something edible.
Well, I
And
can
he's
tell
now
you
to that
it's,
yeah,
yeah.
he's now to that point where he's experimenting and eating his palate has expanded a lot. Oil is still not on his palate at all. So do you have any of those suggestions? I would love to get him
Yep.
tested to see if that's something I could
Yes.
do at the doctor's or get it ordered. But also
Mhm.
once I get him tested, like I'm stuck on, okay, I don't want to go through that fight again of taking away all of my son's options and you know, his distrust in food again to try and get him to do that.
And yeah, so Zinzino has a test that's a fraction of the price from the doctor's tests. So we have our own test, and it is done at an independent lab, so it's not our own. But getting them to take it is different for everybody. Sometimes I say, okay, we've got something that's worked for the last 3, and then it's like, that didn't work at all. So, you know, as they say, if you know one autistic child, you can say you know one, because they're all off, right? Everybody is their own case. So we do different things. First of all, there's different flavors. The popular flavor for kids is called Tutti Frutti, so it's kind of a bubblegum type flavor. So it works well in some things, and like we have kids that just because of the flavor of it, we take it as a shot glass. So if you take a shot glass and you put it mostly water, and it's weight based, so depending on what your child weighs, it's let's see, it would be for every 1 milliliter for every 14 pounds. So it could be just a little bit, right? So if you have this little glass of water and you put a little bit of the oil in it, it goes down. They don't really even see that it's oil because it feels like it's water when it goes down. So that's our number one way, but some people don't like that. Another way is we have a different product called Aqua X that has an emulsifier in it, so it is oil, but when you put it in any liquid, it dissolves with a little bit of a lemony scent to it. So if they really like orange juice, or they have certain things, or they really like another liquid, that's like a thing, then you put it in there and it's almost completely gone. There's a little top layer, just a little bit, but that's been the second thing. Then if they like certain things, some kids, they like yogurts, or they like, you know, anything. It didn't matter. If they like yogurts or something, actually you put it right in there, it's just kind of goes away. We have different other flavors like orange, lemon, mint, grapefruit, and lemon. So if there's other flavors, some of them it's consistency, so they don't like the consistency. So people have just put it on the corner of their bread that they're having because they like the bread, they like toast with butter. And so if they had a marmalade, they do that. Those have been the ways to get the oil in. We do have it in capsule form, but most kids don't like capsules, so they haven't been for autistic kids, but we do have them. The Xenobiotic it doesn't have a flavor, but again, it's a powder that you mix into something, so it can have consistency things. I take the powder and I put a little bit of water in my mouth with it, and to me it tastes like a sugar cookie when you're chewing a sugar cookie. I love the Xenobiotic, but you can actually bake with it. So bake your cookies that they like, bake a pancake that they like, bake anything, and you put that little bit in. Now, especially with autistic and ADHD children, because this is kind of my passion, their microbiome, you've got the good and the bad microbiome, right? We're starving the good bacteria because of we're eating, especially autistic children are eating very, the exact same things. There's certain things they like, so they don't have the variety. And then because of the toxins in the air, because of all the medications we're taking, we're killing off a lot of our good bacteria, and the bad bacteria actually is flourishing. So we need to feed it. That's why we use a prebiotic. It's like food for those bacteria down there. And there's a lot of different kinds. So we have 8 different types of prebiotics in our prebiotic because there's different area of the gut. But with autistic children, especially, their microbiome is so out of whack, so bad, that we have to use such fraction of it. Now, I have this picture. I'm a person who thinks in pictures. So you know those stories that you hear of the soldiers who are out and they find these children that have been left somewhere, or the children that they find that are starving, and then They say don't feed them too much. They're told don't feed them. You have to be very careful, because if you overfeed a starving child, you're going to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
It's too much for their body. You have to be very careful and start little bits at a time for their body to get used to it again. That's how I think of the microbiome, and especially in the kids. So what I have seen is we need to have teeny bits at a time. Usually there's a little scoop in there. Most of us take 1 scoop. But Americans, for the first part, I can do that. I have business in 17 countries. Nobody else do I have to say start on a fraction of the dose. But I do in the United States to everybody. But for our children, and actually our autistic children, I start them on just like this, on things, because it's that bad, how bad our guts are,
Mm-hmm.
especially for them.
Trixie, I do want to say too, like with Alex, we got to the point where he was eating berries and that's about it. And so I took him into Dr. DeSoto at Koa Clinic, and we had a negotiation where I was like, okay, we're not going to pressure you to finish your plate or to try a new food or all these things that grandma and grandpa and auntie and uncle have been telling him to pressure, like to change his diet. We're going to leave that alone and let you heal from that trauma, but only if you agree to take your medicine. You know, so we do a Mary Roots multivitamin in the morning and then one in the evening, and he takes Floridex, and we came out with like a comprehensive, like expensive pee, so to speak. And we deliver it to him in a syringe. And so, you know, you might have the shot glass, but like for Alex, it's a syringe, and he'll literally take anything out of a syringe and then chase it with water. He won't try any new food, but he'll try any new vitamin, any new thing. And so I just feel that if you change the approach to where it's not a food, it's a medicine, a beautiful thing happens, because then they start to feel better and they'll crave that more too, because they're craving that stability, interoceptive, like stabilization. And so then their body starts to formulate and know what it needs to feel better. So maybe trying that approach too, like with a syringe, will not scare him off from his own eating exploration.
You're creative.
Is it,
I would also say I
Excellent
brought,
idea.
yeah.
I did also bring my son to the doctor after he had changed so much, because this doctor knew our family for generations. And I brought him into the doctor, and I'm like, I need to know what you think of this. And I brought that first test and the second test about the omegas. And I said, what do you know about omega balance? What do you know? You know, and he was just so cold to me and said, well, Carla, I like to control things with medicine. So he didn't give anything, any positive, anything. And I just said, well, look at him. He's changed. You can see it on him. And he was just like, well, that's just, you know, doctors, we look at things conservatively. So I changed doctors. And now I work with a lot of doctors at a lot of places. But I think too, you mentioned, Jessica, your, you know, different ways of doing things or having medicines. So when my son got to be a teenager, and every once in a while he'd get bored of what he was taking, so I switched a flavor up or did something else. And when he got to be 13 and he was like, or when he got to be 15 and he was going off to school, where he went to school, bribing actually worked. One of his favorite things was actually peanut M&Ms. So I put a little jar of peanut M&Ms, and if he took it, he got it, and he did it every day, and it got to be that way. And to me, it was just like, I wanted it to work. I just knew that how important it was for him. So whatever works is the way to go.
I do have to speak for my daughter too. You know, the nonverbal, she won't try anything new kind of thing. And there's no negotiating with her because she doesn't communicate, right? So with her, what has worked is, like you said, the little doses. I had a little fight with her. I put it on top of her yogurt. She got tricked. She was so betrayed. But at the same time, that very little bit made her feel different. So she wasn't so aversive to it when she started to feel better too. So even if you get a little bit in at a time, every once in a while, strategically, I found transitions. This was in regards to the probiotics I was feeding her. So, you know, there's always a way to just try.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But
Yeah, and the more stories we get, the more different ways we try. We'll have more stories of how people have tried and what works and can share.
Yeah. So I think Vanessa had to run off. I think I just saw her leave. But Leisha, did you have any questions? I know that she's there. And I'll touch base. Oh, there we go.
No, I was taking everything in now. It's actually the first time I'm hearing, you know, how, you know, with the, you know, in effect, you know, what's going on with them, and really interested. I'm going to read more about it and stuff, so it's just good.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you, Erin, for, you know, making this connection. Erin's, you know, our boots on the ground in Hawaii. Because we always can't have Carla until 11 p.m. But
Well, unless I'm back in Minnesota, then I'm only 5 hours off. So then I'm here.
yeah. So thank you so much. I would just love, you know, the quick next steps if we wanted to look into the testing and what that looks like and stuff. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Just if anyone wants to know, just ask.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Bye.
Okay. So don't jump off. Thanks so much.